Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going down a pretty dark path into the life and crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer.
You know, you sent over some fascinating sources, including excerpts from his Wikipedia entry,
Right?
some of which are even in Spanish.
Oh, wow.
Which I gotta say adds a whole other layer to trying to figure out this guy.
It's true. It's true.
You know?
Yeah, this is a case that has continued to fascinate people for decades. I mean, even after all this time, the name Jeffrey Dahmer still evokes such a strong reaction, you know, a sense of morbid curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if we can retrace his steps, starting from his childhood and then moving through the timeline of his crimes, maybe we can kind of piece together what led him to such darkness. Yeah, right. Maybe get some insight into how this all happened.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
You know, the sources that you shared really paint a picture of Dahmer's early life. That was, well, I guess you could say, troubled.
Definitely troubled.
You know, a tense home environment, constant parental arguments. Even Dahmer himself later acknowledged that this really created a sense of insecurity within the whole family dynamic.
Wow.
Almost like a house of cards ready to collapse.
It's like a foundation that was cracked, you know, right from the start.
Yeah.
And while a difficult childhood certainly doesn't, you know, guarantee that somebody's going to become a serial killer.
Right, of course not.
It can have such a profound impact on psychological development.
Yeah.
And, you know, with Dahmer, we really see some pretty striking early signs.
Yeah, so for instance, at age 4, he had a double hernia operation. Seems routine enough.
Yeah.
But the sources note a noticeable shift in his personality right after.
Oh, wow.
Almost as if a switch was flipped.
That's a chilling detail.
Yeah.
And while it's impossible to say for sure that the operation was directly linked to his later actions, it's around this time that his interest in animal bones really takes hold.
Okay.
It starts with his father showing him how to clean and preserve animal remains.
Yeah.
You know, seemingly harmless, you know, father-son activity.
Right.
But for Dahmer, this transforms into a fascination that just grows increasingly disturbing.
Yeah, the sources detail how he progresses from just collecting roadkill to actually dissecting animals.
Wow.
Meticulously preserving their remains in jars of formaldehyde.
It's not your average childhood, you know, bug collection.
Oh, not at all.
It's the progression, you know, it's the growing detachment from the life that was like in those bones.
Yeah.
Almost like he's studying them, trying to unlock some sort of hidden secret within.
It's really creepy.
Yeah.
And you know, this detachment, it seems to just deepen as he gets into his teenage years.
Right.
He becomes more isolated and outcasted. There are these mentions of these unsettling pranks he would pull. Yeah. His classmates called doing a Dahmer. Something tells me these weren't just, you know, harmless pranks.
I think you're right to be suspicious. You know, these pranks, while they seemed insignificant at the time, they're actually very revealing.
Right.
You know, there's this morbid sense of humor, a lack of empathy, disregard for boundaries.
Right.
Like, he was testing the waters, you know, gauging people's reactions to his disturbing behavior.
And then there's the discovery of his homosexuality.
Right.
You know, a secret that he kept hidden, especially from his parents.
Of course.
You know, while struggling internally with it.
Yeah.
And the sources suggest that that's when he started developing these fantasies of domination and control, which were no doubt fueled by his isolation and repressed desires.
And this is really where things start to take a sinister turn.
Yeah.
You know, you've got this troubled childhood.
Right.
The emergence of his sexuality and this growing fascination with death. All these elements kind of brewing within him, creating a very dangerous internal landscape.
Yeah, like a powder keg.
Exactly.
And tragically, these fantasies don't remain confined to his mind.
Right.
At 16, he actually plans his first attack.
Oh, wow.
He wants to knock unconscious this jogger that he finds attractive. He even hides waiting in the bushes with a baseball bat.
Wow.
Luckily for the intended victim, the jogger never showed up.
That's terrifying. That premeditation, the stalking the weapon, it's a very clear indication that that urge to control, to possess, is already taking root.
Wow.
It's a terrifying premonition of what's to come.
And then at just 18, the line is crossed. His first murder, Stephen Hicks.
Right.
Flew to Dahmer's house with the promise of beer, then bludgeoned to death.
Wow.
Dahmer then dismembers the body, attempts to erase all the evidence, almost like it never happened.
Yeah, the first kill is often a point of no return for a serial killer. It's, a violation of the most fundamental taboo. And for some, the act itself becomes a horrifying addiction.
Oh, wow.
And in Dahmer's case, it seems like this first murder was really the catalyst that unleashed this darkness within a darkness that would consume many more lives, tragically. From that point on, it's just a descent into this horrifying abyss. The killings become more frequent, the methods more gruesome. We see this escalation in depravity, this chilling pattern emerging.
The sources you shared really go into the specifics of his later victims. Toomey Doxeter, Guerrero Sears, each one, selected, dominated, and ultimately destroyed.
It's a horrifying ritual. And there are these disturbing details that really hint at the psychological depths of his crimes. The dismemberment, the cannibalism, the attempts to preserve body parts. All of it points to this desire for control. It goes way beyond the act of killing itself.
There's one detail that really stuck with me. His attempt to create what some have called zombie-like victims. He would drill holes in their skulls and inject acid or boiling water into their brains.
Oh my gosh.
What could possibly drive someone to such extremes?
It seems like Dahmer was driven by this fantasy, this twisted fantasy of complete domination, of eliminating his victim's will and transforming them into these passive objects of his desire. He wanted to create companions who would never leave.
Oh, wow.
Who would never reject him.
That's so messed up.
It's a disturbing manifestation of this deep-seated need for control taken to a horrifying extreme.
It's like this macabre science experiment gone wrong. Almost like he was trying to play God to reanimate life, but in a way that served his own twisted desires.
Absolutely, and it speaks to this complexity of his psychological makeup. We see elements of necrophilia, a fascination with death and the dead, intertwined with this desire to possess and control. It's a dangerous cocktail of dark desires and disturbing compulsions.
The Spanish Wikipedia excerpts you provided mentioned this concept called desapego, which translates to detachment. It suggests this growing disconnect between Dahmer and the value of human life.
Absolutely. It's as if he saw his victims as objects, as specimens to be collected and confessed.
Like they weren't even people to him.
And this detachment allowed him to carry out these horrific acts without remorse, without any sense of the humanity that he was destroying.
It's just unbelievable. And for years, he managed to keep this dark side hidden, living a seemingly normal life, working at a chocolate factory, all the while carrying out these unspeakable acts in secret.
It's a chilling reminder that monsters can often wear very ordinary masks.
You never know who you're dealing with.
Exactly. The duality of his existence is just mind-boggling. On the surface, an unassuming factory worker, but beneath that facade, a depraved killer driven by these dark, unspeakable desires. It's almost impossible to reconcile those two sides.
It's hard to wrap your head around until, of course, the mask finally flipped. In 1991, Tracy Edwards, his intended victim, managed to escape. He led police back to Dahmer's apartment, and the nightmare was finally revealed.
Edwards' escape was a pivotal moment, a crack in this carefully constructed facade that Dahmer had built around himself. And what the police found inside that apartment well, it was a scene straight out of a horror movie. Polaroids of his victims' body parts in the refrigerator.
Oh my God.
Of a testament to the depths of his depravity.
It's almost as if Dahmer was creating his own twisted museum of horrors. This collection of his conquests. Preserved in this most gruesome way imaginable.
And with his capture, the world was finally forced to confront the monster that had been living among them, hidden in plain sight. But even with the evidence laid bare, the question remains.
What is it?
How could someone like Dahmer exist? What led him down this path of unimaginable darkness?
It's a question that haunts us to this day.
It really does.
And that's what we'll explore in the final chapter of this deep dive. The aftermath of his crimes. The trial and the enduring legacy he left behind.
A legacy that continues to fascinate and horrify.
Oh, absolutely. The evidence against Dahmer was just overwhelming. This horrifying tableau of his crimes. Yet the question of his sanity really loomed large over the trial.
It did.
Could someone capable of such calculated cruelty really be considered sane?
Right. That very question became the central point of contention.
Right.
You know, the prosecution argued that Dahmer was this cunning predator, meticulously planning his crimes, fully aware of his actions.
Right.
They portrayed him as this master manipulator, like able to blend in and conceal his dark impulses.
Right, but the defense painted a very different picture, didn't they?
They did. They painted this portrait of a man tormented by mental illness. A slave to compulsions that he couldn't control. They argued that his actions, as horrific as they were, stemmed from these deep-seated psychological disturbances that rendered him incapable of understanding the gravity of his crimes.
So it was really this classic battle between nature and nurture. Was Dahmer inherently evil, a monster born?
Right.
Or was he a product of his environment, his experiences? A tragic figure twisted by these unseen forces.
You know, the experts who examined Dahmer diagnosed him with a range of disorders. Borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and of course, necrophilia, which is a paraphilia characterized by a sexual attraction to corpses. But even with these diagnoses, the question of whether he was legally sane remained this complex and contentious issue.
And what did the jury ultimately decide?
Ultimately, the jury found Dahmer sane and guilty.
Wow.
He was convicted on 15 counts of murder.
Oh my God.
And sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms.
Oh.
Later, another life sentence was added for a murder committed in Ohio. His final destination was the Columbia Correctional Institute in Wisconsin. A place where he would spend the remainder of his days, or so it seemed.
So it seemed, because even within the confines of prison, Dahmer's story took another dark turn.
Yeah, it did, in a chilling twist of fate. The man who had inflicted so much suffering on others met a violent end himself. In 1994, he was murdered by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver.
And Scarver, who was also convicted of murder, claimed that he was carrying out God's will.
It's almost Shakespearean.
It is.
You know, this tragedy, the monster becoming the victim, consumed by the very violence he had unleashed upon the world.
You know, this deep dive into the life and crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer has really taken us to some dark places.
It has.
It's forced us to confront the unsettling reality that monsters can walk among us, hiding in plain sight, and to grapple with these complex psychological factors that contribute to the creation of such depravity.
And perhaps the most unsettling question of all.
What's that?
Is, could this tragedy have been prevented? If the warning signs had been recognized? If intervention had occurred? Could Dahmer's path have been altered?
Could the lives of his victims have been spared?
It's a haunting question.
It really is.
That lingers long after the details of his crimes fade from memory.
It does.
It's a chilling reminder that understanding the roots of evil is not just some academic exercise, but a vital step in preventing future tragedies.
Well said. And with that thought, we conclude our deep dive into the dark world of Jeffrey Dahmer. Thank you for joining us on this unsettling but necessary journey.
Absolutely.